Thank you everyone for coming tonight. We'll get started in a second here. You all right, Sharon?
Yep.
Judy, are you ready?
Okay.
Where did we leave off last time?
Sharon, Jim, can we leave off just before we get into the highway thing?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So tonight we'll be looking at the highway funds,
Yes.
their budget. We'll start with page 14.
What page are we on?
Page 14.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so on page 14, this is the DA fund. It's the highway townwide fund. It doesn't get a lot of use. It is primarily used for the town's highway department to fix bridges that are, inside of the village boundaries. So this is a fairly small fund. And there isn't all that much to it, but so we can move fairly quickly through here. So within the DA 5120.4, I believe there's 10,000 included to be used to pay for probably culverts, material, and the need to, if there was the need to replace the culvert. And actually, it's coming back to me. What I think that 10,000 was for was that for MJ? I apologize. The 10,000 was an estimate that's included in that line so that we could work with our engineering firm to get an estimate prepared so that we can evaluate basically the bridges that are within the village, and and based on that evaluation we can plan for future capital needs, or plan to replace those bridges as necessary. So the DA 5142, that's snow removal. There are again nominal amounts included, and the reason is in the event of a big snowstorm that maybe we would be able to help the village if need be.
Do they reimburse us for that? They don't, do they?
This wouldn't be a reimbursable expense. So that's pretty much DA. There's 3,000 budgeted in from Social Security, or for Social Security, in the event that we do recognize personal services in the for snow removal.
Oh,
And when we're looking at the revenue side of the house, we basically appropriate the entirety. So there is no tax impact with regards to the DA fund.
Dave, can I just check with you? So the GA fund balance is going to be utilized for the 2022 appropriation. Is that correctly read that?
Yep,
And it's basically 42,700.
exactly.
And the current balance, I just want to make sure I'm in the right number, is about 405,000?
Yep, that's accurate.
Thank you.
So, and actually to that point, Mike, say that there was the need to replace a bridge. It's, our engineering firm takes a look at, a bridge and they determined that it's shot, it's hazardous and it needs to be replaced so from that standpoint, we actually have, a fairly decent amount of resources within that fund for that purpose.
Thank you.
Any questions on that page? Okay, move along here, Dave, to page 15.
So on page 15 is the Highway Part-Town Fund. It's the fund that is used to provide all of the highway services that are provided in the community. Snow removal, there's a great brush and weeds removal program, and I guess primarily paving. So this is one of our largest operating funds, and so we can get into it. I came up with the estimate for the DB 1910 400, and that represents the, and I can see where there's a typo. That should be unallocated insurance, which is the amount to insure the highway equipment and the vehicle fleet.
What line is it?
It's DB 1910.4.
Okay.
So then we have maintenance of streets, the DB 5110. Personnel services increased slightly. For the information provided from the highway department, that was just based on the 2% increase, which is what we utilize as a factor for estimate purposes. Contractual amounts have remained the same year over year. Permanent improvement in highway, or the 5112 account.
Well, let me ask a question.
Yep.
And actual in 2020 was 515,000. Then we adopted 726. That almost would indicate some kind of a special happening that would create that kind of increase. Why do we continue that kind of increase? Or was it something that needed to be done and we're just now baselining at 726?
I guess I will. So within the tentative budget format, it doesn't provide for historical, all that much historical information. So within the binders that were provided, there was a 3-year budget to actual worksheet, and you can see they've actually included estimates at 726,800 from at least 2018 through 2022. Actuals in 2018 were 655,000, respectively 772,000 in 2019 and 515,000 in 2020, which you were alluding to, Jim.
Yes.
So it does appear as if there, is some, ups and downs.
Yeah, that's fine. I just asked.
Yep.
What is the contractual expenses in that line? Is that like tar and, gravel and?
Jason could obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, it's going to be the material.
Our brothers, Troy Sand and Gravel, Time Metal, Evolution Construction that does our paving, Jamestown Salt and Solvent, Vantage Equipment, Mirabeto Gas and Diesel, Bobcat of Loversville for equipment, Clark Equipment, Coletti Stone for concrete structures, et cetera, et cetera. Anything that has to do with our contractual for paving is the majority of that, probably 90%.
And are we pretty much done with paving so far this year, or is there more to come?
We were actually did the rest of our driveways today that we had from our last paving project. Right now in that account for this year, with some open POs, we're down to $13,400.
Okay.
Thank you.
13 left. What about the gas increase in prices and that sort of thing? Is that enough to cover?
Taking our average over the 3 years, both with gas and diesel, there is usually a few dollars fluctuation. Granted, we can't be, if you can tell me exactly what it is, I'd love to, but that's why we do have it in.
Yeah.
But over the 3 year period, we've seen the ups and downs. I mean, yes, it's gone up now, but chances are it'll go back down in the spring a little bit and back up in the summer.
Let's move down to machinery.
Just before we get to the machinery line, let's just touch on the 5112, which are our permanent improvements. This is a line, and again, Jason, please correct me if I'm wrong, but where I believe that we have the ability to expend for paving, and and it's these are actually reimbursable appropriations. If there's anything you'd like to add, or
It is roughly so our software doesn't break it down completely for what we had historically. You'll see there's 2.2 columns there. The first two is actually what we use for our drainage itself. That's a separate account. Again, that's something the state likes to see us have separated. That's the 55,000. That is strictly drainage material that we use. The 132 is completely reimbursable. That is our CHIPS funding.
for those who don't know, which is the Consolidated Highway Improvement Program. There's actually a few other programs that the Highway Department has started to submit for, which there's the Extreme Winter Recovery Program and Pave New York.
But if I look at the year-to-date in September, we're over budget on the $55,000 line there, right?
No, Dave, that's because our software combines those 2.2s.
The two lines, so the 132 is included in that one?
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
it's just a little bit of a,
Okay.
we have it figured, but it's just the way that comes out on the monthly finances.
Good, okay.
So with that CHIPS grant, is that money limited to the specific things that are going to be done through that particular line item?
Yes, it can only be used for road reconstruction, and we have to file every year and keep track of where that money monetary value goes to. So we usually allocate the first 132,000 or whatever we're gonna receive that year towards our first project, and then we file those roadways or whatever it's done with the state.
Thank you.
And if we were to skip forward to page 16, to the revenue schedule for the DB fund, you would actually see the direct offset in the basically with CHIPS, it's the DB 3501, the DB 3089 state aid other, that's the paved New York estimate. So anyways, we can flip back to Russian leaves, or on page 15, to Russian leaves, the DB 5140.
Machinery.
I apologize. The 5130 is machinery. This is the line in which we cover the personnel service expenses for 2 employees to maintain, and work on and repair all of the vehicles and the equipment that we have. So obviously, it's those expenses have not increased, or slightly increased. Again, that's just a 2% amount that is universally has been universally used as an estimate. So within the DB 5130.2, that's the equipment and capital outlay. This is the numbers within this line, they connect directly with the equipment and vehicles that are residency out on the roadways. In 2020, you can see we expended $287,000. The highway department did request a $225,000, or had a $225,000 request at this junction last year. For discussions, we felt that decreasing it by $75,000 would be, a positive move, but in hindsight, we are comfortable working with the $225,000 request that the highway department has submitted this year for, to maintain and basically the equipment fleet.
That's the 5 pieces of equipment here in the book, right? I have a question about those 5. They're very expensive. 3 of them are anyway. There's an $80,000.
Tractor.
There's a tractor, a case tractor, $80,000, and a truck for $60,000, and a windy leaf machine for $75,000. Can any of that be purchased out of the fund? I mean, that would be an appropriate way to do that, right? And let me ask, as long as Jason's here, last year, were any of these on the list for last year? Because I don't remember seeing this list last year.
No. Well, we had a list last year, but
I didn't see it. I don't
we weren't
remember.
on that. But
Okay, was,
again, if you look at the bottom of that list, though, when you're talking about the fund too, what we're trying to do is our large, expensive replacement, accessing that reserve that you're referring to, and trying to keep the smaller, less expensive equipment out of our annual equipment replacement.
yeah. But if we maybe if we purchased one of those pieces of equipment, like maybe the $80,000 one, leave the rest there in the line, in the operating budget, but pull the case tractor out and purchase it on the reserve line? Out of the reserve fund? Does that make sense? I mean, under normal circumstances, I'm thinking in private sector business, anything over a certain amount of money would be considered a capital expense and you'd have to pull it out of money that you set aside for capital improvement. And this is not that dissimilar, but I would think we could be able to save some operating income, if you will, by pulling that piece out. Furthermore, I was wondering if we replace these things, I mean, how bad are they? Can we sell them? Can we scrap them? Can we get some money for the ones that we're gonna scrap?
There is a resale, we've been around this, we have a junkyard full of stuff to sell.
Yeah, there's,
None of which you'll really get a big return. As part of what I spoke to you guys about when I had my little meeting with you, our replacement vehicle program, I also gave you guys a sheet of that.
I have that, that's
The
it.
idea is to replace this equipment prior to it becoming worthless.
Right,
And that's what's happened here in the town over the years, is that it's been not turned over. We want to get to a point where we can turn over our small equipment every 5 to 6 years, the larger equipment every 10 to 12 years, so we can at least recoup some money. A lot of this stuff that we can buy on state contract, by turning it over in a timely fashion, we'll find that we'll actually, some of our pickup trucks, of course, nobody ever wants to say, hey, you just want to drive around in a shiny new truck. When we purchase a pickup truck on state contract, if we were to turn that over in 5 to 6 years, we can probably recoup 80 to 85% of our actual expense on that. So there is an advantage. Right now, a pickup truck that we buy to plow with costs, it retails probably a $65,000 to $67,000 truck.
right, that's one you've got.
We
here.
buy it for about 45. So if you keep that truck for 5, 6 years, you're gonna be selling it at 80, 85% at that point.
I think Sharon's trying to just ask what the funding source could be.
Yeah,
Taking it out of the operations side and
Moving.
taking it out of the reserves. Does that make sense?
I guess,
And
I
how
mean,
much
I'm
is
looking
in
at
the
the
reserve?
funds,
so maybe a thought that I've had as we've progressed through this is to, I included, an amount to fund the highway equipment reserve to the tune of 100,000. Maybe we pull back this year, and it's, something that we just continue to work
isn't that
towards.
just 6 of one, half dozen of another? I think that's, I mean, by putting the
Well-
line item in the operating budget, we're making a plan. And that was the intention of putting it in the operating budget. To take it out now and spend it on something feels like counterproductive to what we're trying to do.
I think in time, we're working towards, the right approach. I guess, the only thing that I guess I would add are that these items, they appear, to be at a point where, or at least certainly with respect to the tractor, I mean, it says that it has a bad transmission, it's not repairable, and if that's the scenario, that may be an item that we're not necessarily planning for down the road. That may be something that we should, replace in 22. In the same effect, the trash water pump, the diesel jumping jack compactor, they're nominal. The maintenance truck, just based on the age, again, that sounds like something that, if we don't replace it this year, I would think that, it's probably towards the end of its useful life, just based on the age. I'm not all that familiar with the windy leaf machine. Again, it's,
We're just looking at this funding source, right?
Yeah,
We want to pull it out of the operations and take it from reserves, if there are any reserves to take it from.
and there are, I mean, I'm looking at.
there is,
Yeah.
So just buy it out of the reserves and pull it out of the operating budget.
Well, can I jump in and just see if we're all on the same page with respect to some numbers? So the equipment reserve, I think, was tapped just recently for a purchase, correct?
yes.
So if I've got my numbers right, the equipment reserve is now down to about 555,000? Okay, right, the equipment reserve specifically, Sharon's
Yeah,
what I'm thinking about.
specifically, yeah, 555.
And again, that chart that Jason had put together, which I think is very helpful, for 2023, the equipment purchases are projected to be $290,000. And for 2024, they're projected to be $970,000. So personally, I'm a little bit leery of pulling from that equipment reserve, knowing we've got major purchases planned in 23 and 24, and not to mention 25 and 26. Having said that, talking about funds, I believe the unrestricted fund has approximately $1 million.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I was
in
just
my
about to
mind,
mention that. There's
Okay.
a $963,000 balance in that.
in my mind, that might be a source to
Right.
consider to help with the 2022 funding of operations.
And can we do that?
So-
Can we take money out of that?
Yep, those are good points, basically, with that, what that looks like. From a budgetary standpoint, is, there is no change from the appropriations. But from a financing standpoint, we would increase the amount that we plan to appropriate to finance the overall budget. Basically, what you're doing is you're relying on resources that we've accumulated from prior years' operations to finance the upcoming fiscal year budget.
But that would make sense because it has been over budgeted, but there are reserves left over time that can be used in a particular fiscal year so that you can bring taxes down or spend less in the town. As for the future, we don't know what the future might be. It can sit there for a long period of time and not be utilized. Yet at the same time, the money could be spent wisely now, as the highway department is trying to figure out over time, is to get everything lined up on a regular basis. But there's certainly money there that can be used now.
Well, there's $2 million among the three funds. Am I right?
Yeah.
$2.1 million just in those three funds.
So just for perspective, we appropriated approximately $400,000 last year to finance the highway, or the DB funds operating appropriations, whereas within this tentative, you can see that we haven't appropriated any fund balance at this point.
What happened in September in that fund? I mean, it went from $570,000 to $963,000. Yeah, I mean, what did there?
Could you show me where you're alluding to?
Sorry, I don't want to trip on this. This.
So I'm almost positive, and I can look into this further. What I believe had happened was that I didn't book, or no, I didn't transfer the sales tax revenue from July, well, that we received in July. At the point that we received it, so I pushed it from would have went from our operating account, the 3330, to that 1402 account in September.
Okay. So that's correct though, right? I mean, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
The accounting, you're looking at the reconciled cash balances.
Yeah.
from an accounting standpoint, it was accounted for, it's just that the cash wasn't moved from the account that it was deposited into to the account that we try to push it to.
So are we proposing then that we use some of the reserve funds to,
So Sharon, is that what you're saying? So if we left it in appropriations, but moved some of and appropriate the fund balance for that?
For the $80,000 case
Right.
tractor? Yeah. Yeah,
well, not all
I
of
mean,
it?
that will bring it, you know,
It offsets it, I see what you're saying.
gives us something that we
So
can,
you're using the appropriating fund balance to,
yeah,
Why don't we use all the appropriated fund balance
well, we could, I mean, that's.
to use the 225 so that this line is then would be zero?
The line,
And that would leave them with $750,000?
the line is gonna stay at the 250. Then the appropriations, you're gonna see reflected the 250. So that's the budget, or the appropriation side of the house. On the flip side, the revenue side of the house, that's where we have the opportunity to utilize resources to offset those
So this might drop
appropriations.
by 80, and we'll just have an increase of 80,000.
I think that the plan is to keep it at the 225.
Right.
And then from the financing standpoint, on page 2,
Right,
we would basically increase the appropriated fund balance and reserve fund balance line by at least, I mean, I guess whatever we, and the board feels is appropriate and won't hurt the fiscal health of that operating fund.
right, Yes. yeah. Well, it goes into the plus side.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
That's what I meant, yes.
Much like we did last week with the 95,000 for the parks and recreation.
Right.
Is that what,
Yeah.
and that's just back at the sales tax revenue when we receive that from the county, it gets electronically deposited into one account.
Right,
So then we account for it across the 3 operating funds using the schedule, and then we actually transfer the cash back to the accounts.
okay.
that's what was done, Sharon, for a while there. Because the DB reserve, the fund balance had gotten so high for some poor budgeting back in the 16, 17, 18 budget.
Yeah,
That's why if you looked at the 19 and 20 budget, there was a lot of money appropriated in that DB fund. That was done purposely because it was a planned deficit, because that fund balance had gotten so out of control. So there was a reason there was so much appropriated out of that fund balance. The state comptroller, when it gets to that excessive amount, they actually support a planned deficit when you're doing that.
And to expand on what Jason just mentioned, any time that we're appropriating fund balance or reserve, well, not necessarily reserve fund balance, but the fund balance, that means that we're planning to run a deficit. So basically your appropriations are here and your revenues are down here, and the differential, that financing source is resources that we've aggregated through prior year's operations.
But you can run a balanced budget by decreasing the request side. It's just that we want more than we get in.
Yeah, there
We
was
spend more
actually,
than we get in on a regular basis.
So that's an item that I think that we're going to work towards, and that's the reduction in the reliance of appropriated fund balance, which I can see that we've done as far back as I can see. But basic, what we would strive for in a perfect world is that we don't have to appropriate any fund balance. And what that would indicate is that our planned expenditures, or our appropriations equal our revenues, and which would reflect a structurally balanced budget. Basically, relying on appropriated fund balance, it's like a temporary, it should be viewed as like a temporary, or one-shot financing item to fill a budget. But when it's relied on in perpetuity, it's, basically you call into question the structural nature of your budgets.
And Dave, if I can, just make sure I follow what you're saying. I mean, I'll oversimplify here. In theory, we could never do a balanced budget based purely, structurally balanced based purely on revenues for the year versus expenditures for the year. I'm sorry, we can only get to that point, it appears, by utilizing some of the previously built up reserves that have come into play, that have been established. So as I look at these numbers, I mean, I think there's a path to get to this structurally balanced budget idea by tactically using the fund reserves that are in place, because I assume we don't want to have huge fund reserves just hanging out there forever. I mean, it's the taxpayers' money, and it should be used, right?
If we were in a position where we had, resources that were sitting out there, you would hope to come up with a plan to utilize those resources, either through the creation of reserve funds, or maybe the reduction of the tax levy 1 year, maybe utilize as like a one-shot financing source for a piece of equipment. And actually, to that point, a great example of it is that we've decided to utilize $650,000 of unrestricted general fund resources to offset the differential of our capital project. Basically, we authorized the issuance of $1 million for unforeseen circumstances resulted in the escalation of the project, the total cost of the project, and the feeling was that we didn't want to utilize, we didn't want to go out and issue any more debt to finance the remaining cost of the project. So this is, to your point, an example where we utilized or have restricted $650,000 in unrestricted general fund balance to pay for the remaining portion of the project.
Yeah, but that also means over time, you're overtaxing people, or you wouldn't have the reserve. And now we're in a loop. We're overtaxed, we don't spend it, we save it, and we ask for more money to run the town, and then because of that, we have to use what we just saved to maintain the tax as being low.
Yeah,
That's about correct.
Like I mentioned, all of our budgets, there certainly is a little bit of fluffiness to them, and we're going to work to pare them down, over a period of time, and right, maybe some of the budgetary, practices of the past. And basically, the reason to do that is to ensure that you're not overtaxing your taxpayers.
Mike, I'd like to add, you and Jim actually were right on in your last meeting. Actually, if you looked at the last meeting, around minute 50 to 60, you and Jim had brought up, and Dave explained, basically fund balance policy, which is the town should have.
You two were like spot on right there. We were moving in the right direction of where we're at. And again, like Dave's been saying, this has been a history of this. And like I said, 16, 17, 18's budget was really off in that the comptroller at the time made corrections to sales tax revenue by appropriating it to the DB fund, but left all of it there, and that's why that fund balance got so excessive for those 3 years. Because we weren't rolling that sales tax over into other, like you can, once you fulfill and have a zero tax, which she did correctly, but then she didn't roll that money back over. We kept using out of the A fund, and it depleted the A fund over those times. It was really a poor job done. The meaning of it was well, but it didn't work out that way. That's why in 19 and 20, we tried to use an excessive amount out of that to get that back under control. That's why that equipment reserve was set up initially, trying to get some of that. But it's like you guys are saying, it takes several years to get to that point. Dave's right on track with where he's going. I think at some point they should have a fund balance policy to say, whatever it is. Benny mentioned it in the last meeting, you know, they'll never say what the right number is. Every municipality is different, so the comptroller won't say it needs to be 15%, it needs to be 20%, it needs to be 3 months. They give each municipality its own will to do what they want, but you should follow suit with that. Dave explained that, you know, you gotta have a guide, you gotta have something you're going for. But we have been trying to work towards that with the highway department and that money as well.
Those are good points brought up by Jason, and maybe to just add a little bit of context. So there is a legal statute, it's a real property tax law, section 1318, and which requires which restricts school districts to, or limits them to only having the ability to retain 4% of ensuing year's operations, which maybe I don't want to say it publicly, but it's you know, when you're talking about a $15 million operating budget and you're only allowed to carry forward, you know, 4% of that, it's, you know, you're cutting, you know, you're cutting things close within local governments. To the point Jason made, there is no definitive percentage of the ensuing year's budgeted appropriations that you can carry forward. So it gives local governments a lot more leeway. If the local government did adopt a fund balance policy, which certainly isn't, you know, it isn't a bad idea. The only downside to that is that it does provide for criteria for which the comptroller can then evaluate you against. You know, I've seen municipalities where they would carry over 100 or up to 200% of it. You know, there's unassigned or or unassigned fund balance from year to year, and you know, I wouldn't take any issue to it, but it's just for context.
Yeah, Jim and Sharon, we have not talked about this among ourselves up to now. You know, to me, it seems like a goal for the board, town board, should be to figure out what range of fund balance relative to the appropriations that are typical for that fund is appropriate. And I mean, again, right now, if I've got the numbers correct, I think the unrestricted DB highway fund is close to $1 million, and the appropriations total about $3 million. So, if those numbers are right, is 33%. Is that the right number, or do we think it should be just the board? It should be lower?
Yes. So what is your opinions then on this $80,000? I think myself personally, I'd like to leave most of that in there. So if we're going to take anything from reserves, 80,000 from reserves for the case tractor would be my limit on it from reserves.
From reserves or the fund balance? We were talking about both things, I want to make sure we're clear there.
And Dave, if I may, just quickly, so, again, to me, the equipment reserve looks like it's going to be depleted over the next 2 to 4 years.
Yeah, the 550,000.
Right.
Yeah, although we're putting another 100 in it, right?
Well, again, that's another question,
That's
whether we want to include that authorization or not
Yeah.
for the current year. I guess, again, to me, if we're debating withdrawing from it, I don't necessarily think we should be adding to it. Especially to me, given the unrestricted fund balance, which, again, in my mind, maybe is an appropriate place to draw some amount, not 500,000 or anything.
No.
It's some amount. I'm sorry.
No, I think you're spot on, Mike. And I guess I think the mention they just had was that the 80 would be coming from basically unappropriated assigned fund balance on the DB.
So basically, we're talking about leaving the 225,000 total outlay intact, and then on the funding side, looking at drawing 80,000 from the unrestricted.
At least, yep.
And does that mean that you're gonna leave the $100,000 alone, or the appropriation for the 100,000?
So again, that's another question, Sharon. I guess, again, I don't know what the
But
group feels.
Budgetarily, I think that's a good idea because it's a placeholder. So that you have a plan going forward.
I think it's a great, I mean, I guess obviously I think it's a good idea because I included it, because I value the need for, to ensure that our capital, needs are met, and based on, the need to withdraw from the reserve earlier this year, it puts us, in a position where, we certainly could deplete that equipment reserve if there isn't a plan to continue to fund it. I guess what it will ultimately come down to is the tolerance for the amount of appropriations within the DB fund.
Well, I think over the last couple of years that we've been getting together, I think Jason has done a pretty good job of laying out their plan to replace vehicles on a timely basis, and I think we, personally, I'm in favor of that plan. I don't know anybody that wouldn't be, but I think if we're planning this, to put this in there, and then looking at what our expenditures are planned to be, I think we're penny wise and pound foolish to not fund, when we know in the future we're going to have to spend, easily hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for the next.
Next year, our plan alone is to purchase another tandem dump truck. We just spent $239, it'll probably go up a few $1,000.
Right, so
roughly.
that could be 250,
So like
260
Dave's
next
plan of
year.
adding the 100 is really, it's good, but you're really putting 100 out of 500 over a 2-year period. But it's a step in the right direction.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. It's just we've got a philosophy here now. I just don't want to lose momentum on that.
And there were some materials that were provided in the budget development workbooks before we even got into into the type of things from the budget development standpoint where I think it's very important that we identify and evaluate all of the equipment, all of our vehicles, all of our infrastructure, and use this medium, which is the budget development process, to go through all of those items on a line-by-line basis, and just ensure that we don't get caught off guard by something along the line, similar to what we were caught off guard by in March of 2020.
Other than that, I think we're good there.
Could we just look at that snow removal category for a moment?
Sure.
And the only thing I just want to add before we move into snow removal is that I know it's not something that's common here, but there certainly is the ability for us to issue like small amounts in debt to finance the acquisition of equipment and pay it back over like a 5-year period. There's that. There's installment purchase contracts, which are similar. I mean, you do incur a small amount of debt, interest, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not over a 5-year period of time.
That's a good point. Because we don't do that normally, right? We just pay cash and,
We buy
yeah.
our equipment and vehicles outright, which
And the rates right now are very favorable, but,
it's something that's common, in municipalities and school districts. I don't have much of an opinion, for one or the other, but say we were in a position where we needed a $500,000 piece of equipment and we didn't plan to acquire that piece of equipment, and just something goes down, we need to buy it. We'd certainly, consider the idea of buying something at that amount and financing it over a 5-year period, similar to how you would purchase a personal vehicle.
So if I can ask a question on that point, and bear with me because I'm not good at distinguishing between perhaps what might be equipment and what might be vehicles. Is the state purchase program applicable to pretty much all the things that Jason has laid out on the acquisition under the future use list?
Everything on there would be state or county contract.
And in those programs, is there an opportunity for financing, or is it just, here's the deal you pay for?
There's been more opportunities that are coming about more and more, and going back not too long ago, it was almost non-existent, but they are starting to come.
Thank you.
And I guess moving on to snow removal, it's the DB 5142. And a small increase in personal services, no equipment or capital outlay, and from a contractual standpoint, we are staying at the amount that was included in the 2021 budget. Looking backwards, that amount has stayed the same since at least 2018. I guess it looks as if the actual amount that we expend is, may correlate with the needs in any given winter. In 18, it looks as if we had spent 350 of the 420 that we had budgeted. In 19, we spent 406 of the 419. Looks like in 20, we had a fairly light year. Only expended 314 of the 420.
And I was too lazy to look back at the monthly compilations. Does anyone easily have an estimate of what's been spent through August or through September?
we've got 5140.
We have,
We've got about 16, or wait a minute, 100 and, just a minute. Oh, I'm looking at the screen. Yeah, we've got 140,000 left, right?
I have about 119, we have open POs that are part
Oh,
of
you
that
do?
as well. But yeah, it's there, and
Okay,
that
so,
is predominantly, it's salt is what takes up that whole thing, and that's why you do see a pretty good sized fluctuation. But again, a lot of that with the highway department, everything we do costs so much money. That's what I explained to when the town clerk has $1,000 left over in a contractual. You think, oh, it's $1,000 for us. That's $100,000 for us. Salt at $55 a ton, it's one of those. We spent almost $80,000 on December 20th alone last year, so it's one of those 1 to 2 storms makes $100,000 go like you wouldn't believe. So it is, that's a number we feel comfortable with, and obviously with road salt and plowing equipment, we don't want to take any chances with that one. That is one that's.
if we get towards the end of the year, and we still have money left, can you fill up the salt shed?
That's what we will do with it. We will, well, again, I mean, that's those numbers now. We still will have to fill 10,000 gallons of our winter mix of diesel fuel. That will come out of that. And we will usually wait to the end and then we fill our salt in with that. Historically, the salt's cheaper, obviously, before the winter. So over the next month, we will get, in fact, we just had written a PO today for $50,000 for more salt. So it's.
Can you contract for that material for salt?
We buy that off of state contract.
Oh, it has to be state, okay.
And just to,
Well, go ahead,
oh, sorry. Just to add, you know, anytime you can buy anything at state contract pricing, you're almost guaranteeing that you're acquiring the item at by far the lowest possible you know, rate. And to that, and then so outside of state contracts, there are also county contracts which are similar, and you know, they also provide for you know savings, I guess.
And just, Jason, just to give you a heads up, I've been delving into the very limited uses of the ARPA funding that we have. One thing I did run across was a street sweeper is an ARPA qualified purchase, or it appears to be at first glance. So I see in 20,
Yeah, that is something that we've been putting off for years, and it's because it's a tough situation. It's so expensive. They're running around $350,000 right now.
well, I have something on my desk, and I won't say I'm dead positive, but from what I've read a couple of times over, is a street sweeper is one of the pieces of equipment that is available to be funded through the ARPA funds. So again, that has a 3 or 4 year application and a 5 or 6 year purchase deadline. So if not in 22, definitely in 23, we should be able to take, you know, a good chunk of that out of there.
Dave and I we can talk about it and figure that all out. We've actually, where ours is on limited life, so we actually plan on renting one next April for the season. It's a $5,000 rental, but again, at $350,000. We've been balancing between rental equipment versus purchasing. You know, it's difficult. Again, $350,000 is, you can rent a lot of $5,000 before that maintenance kicks in. So it's that balance of how much you use items, but it's definitely something we can look into.
Well, I'm, you know, just looking at your expenditures for 24.
Yep.
You know, you've got to.
Yeah, at some point we're going to
You're
have.
talking about $1 million, and if we can cut half of that out, that's a win-win for everybody.
So then moving on to the employee benefits. This is
Can I go back a minute?
sure, of course.
Can we discuss the impact of a 10-hour work week for 4 days and 4 10s, and then going to 8 5s,
5/8.
5 8s? My rough estimates is there's $62,000 worth of overtime. Can someone explain that, if that's accurate or not? And then whether there's a better way that we could have the people work and not expend that kind of money? Because this is just normal time. You add up all the personnel services, but that's not what we pay them
I'm going to defer to Penny with regards to this one. I think this is more of a policy question that maybe outside of my peripheral.
The highway department, with the highway superintendent, is their own branch. That's probably not the right term, but the highway superintendent gets to set his hours, and his purview that 410s is what works well, and he tells us that there are cost savings to working 410s. You know, in the summertime, I don't disagree. We've had our disagreements in the past about this, but Dave and Jason seem to think that this works. That would be something we could talk about at the workshop on Thursday, and the board can decide what, you know. Again, it's even if the board thinks it's a great idea to go to 5 or 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, it's still going to be a decision of the highway superintendent. It's his department. He's an elected official. It's run the way he sees fit.
If you added up all the personal services in DB at the moment, that comes out to X. But we're not paying X, we're paying X plus overtime. Where does the extra overtime money come from?
Well, incorporated within the personnel service lines is a buffer for, you know, amounts in excess of what you know, that I guess.
Oh, so these aren't plus 2%?
Dave, that number, it's a 2% on their salary,
Yes.
but it includes in the 3 line items, it includes 10 days of overtime during the snow removal, 7 days of overtime for brush and weeds, and 7 days of overtime for general road maintenance. That's
Okay.
how that number gets broken up.
Great.
That's where we budget it.
Oh, excellent, thank you.
Yep,
Does that include working on holidays for brushery?
yes.
Is that necessary? I mean, honestly.
Yeah, Sharon, you've gone over this with us several
Yeah, I know,
times on
I
this.
know.
We've explained it endless times. We actually will be starting to pick up brush this week, the leaves, they don't stop. Again, it's that once we get snow and we have plowable snow, if the leaves are not picked up, as soon as that plow goes through, we are going to fill every ditch line with all the leaves. It's a greater evil that we create by picking up leaves, so everyone puts them in the roads. So if we get snow and those leaves aren't picked up, we've created a drainage issue. Now all the culvert pipes that go down through every roadway, every basin, now they're filled. Now we have a water issue that once we've covered them with snow, we can't go clean them up till the spring.
If there's a mandate to people that they have to put them in a bag,
I mean, we could, that would be a town
Yeah, absolutely.
policy. I'm not sure that's gonna,
I would buy Benny a bulletproof vest for
well, we do for the most part. I mean, there's only a certain period of time that you're allowed to. put them in.
Correct, but it is tough, and the residents do like it. It's tough, it really is. I understand what you're saying, I really do, but
But, no, that's totally, I understand completely what you're saying.
yeah.
The issue would be, does it have to be done on a holiday?
And the issue is they work nonstop. These guys go 10 hours a day with backpack blowers. Machines don't stop. I think you'd be amazed if you ever saw how much we actually pick up in one season. So what happens is, seems like nothing. We're going to be starting this week. Come the middle of November, when snow can be happening any second, we're still picking up leaves nonstop. We make around, it takes us around 4 days to get around the town, so every week you start back over again and we go nonstop. It's not like,
Oh, okay, so the need is there
Right.
continuously enough that you have to cycle through continuously.
correct, we
to
don't
get it
stop
done.
at all. And if I knew, I'll be honest with you, if we knew we weren't gonna get snow till, December 15th, yeah, we would be able to do that, but we can't. And all it takes is one plowable snow, and drive down the developments right now, you'd see all those leaves just back into a ditch line and everyone's driveway pipe plugged, and it really creates a problem.
Okay, thank you.
By offering the service, we're handcuffed on that. We have to do that to get that done. We have a small staff. It really takes 4 guys per unit, and we have 2 crews going along with the brush and weeds, and they really do not stop from when we start till the time we're done.
There was a report done a little while back, I don't remember who did it for us, on how many hours of overtime there are, and it was, it was an extra whole person. Would you benefit from just hiring another person?
You're carrying your benefit. It'd be amazing how much you think that would save. One person isn't going to do us enough. It's the same thing as we talk about with a plower. You can't just add one person. You're handling full crews. So even that, one person isn't going to really change our leaf pickup. 4 people would. That would be great. 4 people with a full-time salary plus benefits. It just, believe me, the small amount, and I know I'm saying small compared to 4 full-time employees. The amount that they make in overtime, it's nothing compared to it. I think Dave could explain the benefits end of once we start hiring full-time people. And a lot of our equipment and what we're doing is difficult. We do have some part-time seasonal that they do come in and do stuff with. A lot of the equipment and a lot of the things we do, even with our OSHA training, it's difficult to get a lot of part-time people to fill those roles.
Especially now.
And so going back to DB 5140, you're saying it costs $172,633 a year to pick up leaves. Is that true?
As well as our transfer station, that factors into our transfer
Okay.
station, hauling the brush and weeds, it's open year-round. We do still pick up bags and barrels during the season. It's
Okay.
not just, but it's that whole thing of what we do. Yep.
Okay, it just puts a price on it, thank you.
Yep.
Not on totally different now. I was always wondering, is there a schedule posted somewhere so that, like, my neighborhood would know you guys are gonna come by Monday this week or Tuesday next week? or
There is no schedule,
There isn't?
and we do that for a reason, because we could get slowed down, whether if we
Yeah.
get rain, it takes that much longer, and once we put a schedule out, they come after, you weren't here on Monday, why weren't you here? And
Okay.
so we just start, we actually have a crew start on Joseph Street, and a crew starts in Rollins Hollow West too, and they work around to each other, and then that takes us 4 days, and we start over.
So, for it. Thank you.
Are we good there? Okay. E,
2 employee benefits. Again, these are estimates that I prepared. Retirement seems to have shot up.
Yeah, that's a big increase, isn't it? Is that because you had somebody retired?
Usually that would indicate that it would go the other way.
No.
I would have to circle back to see how I derived the 106,500. But anyway, Social Security is pretty standard. It's just 0.1 times the 7.65%. Unemployment and disability insurance, those are, I just included a flat amount of 2,500, and hospital and medical insurance, it's your medical and dental insurance. It increases slightly. Actually, the premiums are increasing upwards of, I believe, about 7%. The detail is included within the binders. The reason that the estimate or the appropriation from 21 doesn't increase all that drastically is due to the fact that we have there was a retirement is in the department. So that's unemployed. That's all that I have for employee benefits. And all that information would be towards the end of the binder in the estimates prepared by the comptroller. It's pretty detailed, so I was encourage that we stay with these estimates. And really before we get into the revenue side, we have that item that we've discussed regarding the funding of the highway equipment reserve. I just felt like 100,000 was a good starting point, so that's what we have utilized. I guess we'll be able to discuss with the board what their thoughts are regarding moving in this direction. At the workshop on Thursday. So moving on to revenues. The tax, I guess the sales tax distributions. I don't have a definitive, not a definitive, but the county treasurer prepares a sales tax estimate for the upcoming fiscal, and that's the number that I, being conservative, utilize, and would plug into the fund. We have yet to receive that, but that's okay. It should be coming shortly.
We should have that number this week. The budget was released over the budget figures were released over the weekend, and the county is estimating an extra 17 million for 2022 in sales tax increase for the county.
Which, just for perspective, I think we budgeted for 130, and they're planning to receive 147. Is that the amount that gets redistributed to the?
Not completely, no.
Yeah. So sales tax is utilized by the county to fund the county operation generally first, and then if there are amounts left over, then that's where they would have the ability to redistribute those resources to the localities or the municipalities within the county.
We should have that number by the end of the week. I do expect it to be larger than last year's number actually.
What impact would that have on this tentative budget?
If it, I would say, so I utilized 3.5 as a tentative revenue estimate townwide. If, say, the county estimates that we'll be the recipients of $4 million in sales tax revenue in 2022, then we, there would be a $500,000 reduction. From the need to levy a tax, which we've worked our way down to, fairly significantly, I believe at this point. Maybe a tax decrease, I guess, if you're.
And that number's not in here yet.
No, we budgeted 3.5 for sales tax, but we're not sure what the county's going to give, what the county estimate is going to be.
The capital projects fund, so we've restricted resources to be used to replace a aging fuel island, and actually relocated to a town property that will eventually be the future site of the highway complex. We then received an estimate from our engineering firm regarding the cost to replace that fuel island station to the tune of $300,000. That estimate's included in those binders, but this is a straight. This is just a I guess this is a way to transparently show your tax base that we're planning to, complete this project in 2022. On the revenue side of the house, we actually have resources restricted for this purpose. That's an H 5031. So basically, there's a transfer from our general fund to which actually is a expenditure. So it kind of inflates the operating budget, but there's no tax impact. So hopefully, we can complete this project, in 2022.
There's like 600,000 set aside for that. What was MJ's estimate to do? It was MJ's that did this, right? Is this all we're gonna have to spend out of that?
The reserve was originally set up with 660,000 in resources, and that's to not only replace this fuel island, but to also replace basically that big blue building behind the highway department.
The cold storage building is also in dire need of replacement.
Yeah. So we're not gonna do the cold storage building yet, or we can't do both?
Well, we could, that would be a board decision to do both projects next year.
I believe the estimate for that piece was upwards of 600,000. Jason could correct me if I'm wrong, but we wouldn't, at this junction, we wouldn't have the resources to complete both pieces of the project without having to basically levy tax against their tax base to finance the differential, or issue, more debt to finance that project. But and again, this kind of comes back to the highway equipment reserve, where this is another reserve that we certainly could include appropriations within the budget to increase the resources within the reserve to pay for the project in the future, and whenever we plan to replace the building.
You said the future site of the highway department. Are we gonna build a new highway department? And
Well,
when
that's been kicked around for years and years,
Oh.
but yes.
Is that a plan? I mean, are we?
We're going to put it on paper. We're putting it on paper this year, and we're going to hope to plan to, really figure out the financing to complete a project of that size, something like that. Then that will be material. The size of the project will be substantial, so it'll likely. That would be one that would probably likely be financed with debt over a 30-year period of time. You can always pay down the debt sooner if you have, if you find yourself with, excess resources.
So that would more like, that's like a referendum,
Yes,
you know?
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm sure it is something.
although in a building with single pane glass, I don't think it's going to be hard to pass it, so. When we get, the windows in that building are awful. How old is that building, Jason? 19?
Late 60s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's nothing.
That's not old.
Come take a tour.
Well, compared to us, it's not old. but-
No, that's it.
Yeah, the ambulance.
What's included in the tentative is,
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? So on these remaining detailed pages with the special districts, do we have any, does the town board have any opportunity to change any of those proposed amounts?
Well, I suppose we have some leeway with the ambulance corps. The fire is a contract. We signed a 5-year contract with the fire for fire protection. I'm a little leery of telling the ambulance service that, you know, you've got to take $10,000 or $15,000 off your budget because we're a couple pennies over the cap. I think when our residents call for an ambulance, they want to have one there when it's there. So I'm a lot leery of messing around with the ambulance.
Just for information, is this the only ambulance service you could use, or could we use other ones? Are we under contract?
We could work with probably any ambulatory company that would like be willing to provide the service.
I don't think we want to go outside. I mean, we have an ambulance service that's a mile down the road. If we to put, they would be. I don't know, Jim. I don't think that's an option.
Well, I just asked a question.
I
And
don't think
also,
it's an option.
whatever they put in the budget, they get, is that correct?
Pretty much, yes.
Generally, yes.
Yeah, if they buy land,
That's why.
they would just tax us, is that correct?
The body that has the authority to restrict or accept their budgetary requests is the governing body of the town.
So I suppose technically, Jim, yes, we could negotiate with the ambulance corps, but like I said, optically and personally, I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay.
So just for context, ambulance districts and fire protection districts, they're basically regulated by the town, you know, in which they are within the municipality that established those districts. With regards to the ambulance district, us in Boston created the district, I think in the 70s or 80s. Similarly, a fire protection district was established with us, Boston, and the village of Boston Spa. With Boston Spa, with the fire protection district, we entered into a 5-year contract. So you know, the amount that we levy on their behalf is fixed. With regards to the fire districts, they have their own governing bodies, so they can levy whatever their board determines is necessary to finance their operations. The town board has no regulatory or oversight.
So in 2020, actual was 566, and now it's 680, $114,000 more. Just ask.
The 21 though, too, was
What's
between those two.
Yeah.
Oh. Do we know what they've spent so far? We don't know that. We don't know if they're on track or not, do we?
I think I think it's important that we receive their financial reports, so that we can monitor their fiscal position year over year. I don't think that's something that we've historically done. I know it's something that I would like to see on a forward-going basis.
Ray was here a few months back and did kind of tell us where, the extra, it looks like extra, but where the expenses have come from. They've spent a lot of money, COVID-related materials and items and cleanups and just expenses. It's been a very expensive year for the ambulance corps.
Are they exclusively ours, or do they have other towns or places they serve?
They service the town of Milton and Boston, and as far as what they do outside of that purview, I wouldn't know. I'm assuming they can be contracted by other localities to provide that service, if they have the resources.
Most their services in the town of Milton and the village. And they're, a small percentage of the town of Boston is also covered by the ambulance corps, emergency corps.
Yeah, the emergency corps broke out 78% to Milton and 22% basically to Boston, town of Boston.
So we're not paying for Boston, are we?
No,
No,
the
no, they're
village,
like-
the town pays their, the town of Boston pays theirs.
Just for contact, or just for, since town, well, since we created this ambulance district, you know, and then we, you know, we, and the fire protection district, they actually are included within our tax levy limit calculation. So, you know, basically, like, when we have the ability to, you know, increase our levy by 2%, that's very common. Usually it's not even 2% because there's a property tax growth factor and then an inflation factor, but basically if you use 2% as a guide, I mean, that's, if we're trying to stay within the cap, you know, you would theoretically hope that your special districts are, you know, doing something similar. So, I guess we touched on the ambulance district, fire protection. It's, we were entered into a contract, the rate's fixed. The rate multiplied by our assessed valuation is how we determine the total amount that we levy on their behalf. If you look at lighting, that's an item that increases, you know, more than what you would expect. I guess the reason for that is that basically I would have utilized how much the NACRID and Constellation charges. NACRID's the delivery, Constellation is the supply. So it appears as if, you know, we certainly it costs more to keep the lights on within that lighting district than what we have historically budgeted. So we're going to right that wrong. It's really not a material differential. And actually we do have resources within the fund, in the lighting district fund. So we're going to appropriate about $6,000 to offset the cost of that lighting district. With respect to the water districts, the only notable thing that I have is that we've incorporated appropriations for maintenance. Basically, we own all the infrastructure, and that's all of the water lines. A fair amount of them are actually, I believe, just dedicated to the town after developers were able to develop whatever it was that they were doing. So yeah, the infrastructure became ours. There's a big, it looks like a water district boom in the early 2000s where all of these districts were established. We fortunately kind of had to do much or maybe any repairs or replacements or at least reimburse the village if there was an issue. But I think it may be time that we start to plan to accumulate resources within those special districts to for those purposes. If need be. Basically, if there was a burst pipe in the town, the village would hire its engineer, or use their own resources to repair the break, and then they would bill us for that cost, and rather than the town bearing that cost, we can, you know, by including these appropriations, we can, you know, set aside resources to, you know, to pay for, you know, those types of events in the future.
So Dave, I just had one question about that, I guess the layout here. So the lower Greenfield Avenue Water District shows an appropriation amount, but then I don't see any of the columns for source of revenue with a number.
Page 24.
Page 2.
Oh, you're going back to that.
I'm sorry, it's summary page. Oh, I see, on the detail page on 24, it does show real property tax, but it doesn't seem to carry to the summary page 2. I'm not sure what that is.
What is it? So on page 24, the transfer to other funds. So within these engineering reports that were, you know, I guess provided at the inception of the, I guess, when these water districts were developed, they actually designated the amounts that we should be charging those, the residents within those water districts. So some of the amounts they were supposed to go back to the town for administrative costs, and the other portion would be basically accumulated within the fund to offset the cost of maintenance and repairs. So.
Right, so I think I see that, Dave, on the detail on page 24, but I guess what I'm just wondering, on page 24, it appears that the funding to cover that cost is to be from real property taxes, but then on the summary page 2, I don't see a line entry item for the 1862 on that summary page.
That appears to be a mistake.
Okay, it's not a big number, but I just
Good catch.
want to be sure to account for it.
We will address before it makes its way to the preliminary.
Oh, it didn't carry over. Oh, I see, okay.
So these appropriations for the water districts, again, to sum up what I think I heard you say, that basically these are a new process beginning here in 2022 to cover anticipated expenses going forward.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. They may have been items that we, you know, that just may not have been considered through prior budget development processes.
Any other questions? Jim? Sharon?
On that department?
On the water there? Okay. Anything else coming to mind?
Yeah, I got a couple of questions. Is there, a meeting a couple weeks ago, you had the insurance man here, and somebody recommended increasing the deductibles to lower our insurance rates. Has there been any movement on that? Because the policies in here don't reflect that, is it $2,500
We did increase our deductibles.
to $2,500?
I want to say they're reflected in the insurance agreement that we have. It's included in the binder, but I can certainly look into that tomorrow.
Okay.
And I'll see.
Also, there was I noticed in the 2020 numbers, looking at some of the revenue numbers from 2020, that there was quite a bit of loss there from the non-property tax, which would be sales tax, I assume, and other fees and whatnot. Isn't the ARPA money available for that, to cover that shortfall?
It's a very complicated formula to figure out your losses. If you had a gain in one area and a loss in the other, you can't necessarily collect on the loss because we had a plus on another side.
Okay, well, that makes some sense, but I don't see an increase.
There
On
was information regarding that calculation in the ARPA reserve fund plan that I
yeah,
placed in the binder.
place in here, I read it,
If,
yeah.
it may have been footnoted, if you want to, I can certainly provide the whole workbook that, and I guess the guidance that would explain how that calculation works. I can certainly make that available, but unfortunately, we didn't lose, and yeah, exactly, enough to utilize those as resources in 2022.
Good, Mike. Anybody else? Jim, Sharon? All set?
Well, so, at the end of this process, we've gone through the budget, and we've cut $495,000. That's my little count, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
$495,000. The balance to be raised by property taxes, the tax levy, has not been determined at all. Because we haven't looked at not only what has been cut, but what might be used in appropriated fund balance and reserve fund balances. That would be a decision by the board.
Exactly.
And then how much the end rate, or how much would be taxed would be determined at that point.
Exactly. You're always solving for the property tax last. So, I mean, there's just so many moving parts when you're putting a budget together, and so that's why what was reflected in the tentative is in probably no way, shape, or form what the tax impact will be to the tax base.
And then we have workshops with the board.
Right, there's a workshop Thursday night.
Right. And then you end up with a preliminary budget.
Correct.
And then after that, a public meeting, is that
There's a
correct?
public hearing
Right.
after that, yes.
And then the board can adopt or not adopt. After that.
So
By November 20th.
well,
then
it'd be nice
there's,
to do it before election day, I would think.
We have to have a public hearing,
Yeah,
so we have to have a special meeting of the board to set a public hearing.
what's
Yeah,
the
that's
earliest
5
that can be
days.
done?
It's 5 days after the preliminary budget is announced. You have to have a minimum of 5 days.
Right.
yes, yep. But
I agree with Sharon that there's a reason to somehow push it through, not push it, but at least have a schedule that allows the public to see what the taxes might be.
I think what we'll end up seeing in the preliminary will be fairly close to where we hope to be, and from there, then it's a budget. I mean, it's fluid. I mean, we can still, we could still go up, down.
Let me ask this. Thursday night, are you going to address the part-time issue of funding part-time people at a higher rate, or are you going to keep it the way it is? Are you going to talk about the furniture? Are you about that?
The entire budget will be up for discussion at the workshop.
And at that point in time, you'll have a new preliminary budget done.
I think after Thursday night, I can I would be able to utilize the input, afforded by the board and you guys to basically update this and put it into a
Will
preliminary.
you update that for Thursday's meeting or not? But based on what we've suggested or not?
I think it's, well, that's a great point. I can't update this, but what I think would be to the benefit of all involved would be to include maybe a schedule of, proposed.
Even if we did page 2, I mean, not to go through all of it, but then maybe
Yeah, see why I can't do
we're gonna look
that.
at page 2 based on,
Based on
What we
adjustments
talked
On
about.
that
on what we've come up with here.
yeah,
Yeah, certainly not as a formal document, but
no.
the budget committee certainly came up with solutions or additives.
Yeah.
Recommendations.
That should
Yeah,
be,
just
recommendations, that should be codified, and then it should be almost presented to the board that turns into a workshop.
we, exactly, I would, I don't know what the board's feeling is, but I mean, I would almost present each adjustment and, get 3 yay or nays and, kind of just keep moving down throughout those items and, they would more or less, that would be what we would, include within the preliminary version.
Sounds like best effort, I mean, that's the
Yeah.
best we can hope for.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you Thursday night at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.
you.